Lady werewolves, a growing problem? My Daughter Eloped with a Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. You know, from the moment Helena told me she was expecting, the two of us put our lives together into one life to make sure that our baby girl, who I will call Bettina, got the best of everything. Helena and I got married. She and I sacrificed. We saved. We worked our fingers to the bone. But it all seemed worth it, because we loved our daughter so much. And now she's gone and eloped with a lowlife, who is literally some kind of a werewolf, part-time each month. Bettina is old enough to legally make her own decisions, but Helena and I are still trying to pressure her into getting an annulment. We threatened to cut off her inheritance, but she thinks she's in love, so she just doesn't care. We've discussed telling her that she's cut off. We thought maybe then she might go and live with this awful fellow and eventually realize the error of her ways and come home to us to apologize. The trouble is we don't feel she's safe living with that so-called man, and so we don't have the heart to cut her off or even to seriously threaten to do it. We hired 2 detectives to follow them and report back, but all I mostly ended up with were more pictures of that hound with his arms all over our precious daughter. There must be a more cost-effective way to respond to all of this, one that might get her away from him of her own free will before he damages her permanently. So big accusations require some backing up. For that reason, I think next I should justify why I'm calling this guy a werewolf in the first place. Is that hyperbole or exaggeration? Sadly, in this case, I mean werewolf in the old-fashioned, boring, and literal way. When I first met this guy, I was somewhat off-put by his aggressive gruffness. I would even go so far as to call the fellow a bore. My wife, on the other hand, was introduced to him shortly thereafter by me, and she found him thoroughly entrancing, to use her own adjective. Let's call him Vlad, just because I sometimes wish I could impale him on a stake somewhere in Transylvania and get my daughter back. Now, Vlad is from some Eastern European country, and he has a thick accent of some sort. I'm not sure which. He has a world prize unibrow, which my wife tells me makes him look, dashing. The oddest thing about his look is how light his blonde hair is. I thought it was dyed blonde at first. That's how light it was. But his eyebrows and 5 o'clock shadow are blonde too, so it must be real. His eyes are also a very light color, similar to the hair. Sort of light brown, sort of amber. When you couple his unique look with his weightlifter gym rat physique, Vlad seems to be fascinating to the ladies no matter what age. They can't see him clearly and impartially the way I can. So the first time I saw Vlad transform, he and my daughter deliberately wanted my wife and me to see this. They thought we would think it was cool, if you could imagine such a thing. He was a muscular young blonde man with an impenetrable accent and gruff demeanor 1 second, and the next, he was gurgling and gyrating all over the library in our home. And that's another thing. If you're going to turn into a werewolf and make a mess all over everything, you could at the very least do it outside, on the lawn. The servants are human beings too, you know. It is entirely unfair to make them clean up after your mess when it all could have been avoided in the first place. At any rate, I had been studying ancient languages when my wife and daughter walked in with this young blonde unibrow fellow. The 2 young people said they had something to announce to me and my wife, and then the horrible display I began to describe earlier commenced. Well, when that boy's skull elongated into one more closely resembling that of a wolf or a dog, my poor wife fainted dead away. Fortunately, she did not hurt her head in the fall, because I never would have been able to forgive that young man for that. His human ears disappeared under fur, and different ears popped up out of his head. He seemed to devolve into a four-legged canine, then re-evolve up into an upright version of that previous wolf. Once again, this was the blonde creature that we're discussing. His hair color remained essentially the same in either form. His eyes grew even more amber than amber, and we were looking at a dog version of this man. I am ashamed to admit that I didn't take it very well, and my bowels and bladder both had little accidents, of which I had to immediately withdraw to attend to. When I was able to shower and change, I was appalled to find the young man had not left with his tail between his legs after all the trouble he had caused. Instead, he wanted to apologize to me. This was when he was in human form, but his accent was so thick that he may as well have still been in werewolf form. I had no idea what he was saying, and so I'm afraid I was somewhat unfriendly toward the lad. We both got into it a bit, and it quickly became clear that he and I were not on the road to becoming friends. I did not want my daughter marrying a man who became a wolf when the wolfbane bloomed, and I told that to both of them in no uncertain terms. The boy shouted a while, and then he left, and the girl ran to her room in tears. But they stopped seeing each other over the next couple of days, and I thought everything was dealt with. Then one morning my wife woke me up by screaming that our daughter was gone. I jumped out of bed, ran to her room, and she's left in the night with a note pinned to her pillow. In the note, she details how she and the wolfman were going to ask our permission to get married, but my behavior was so horrible that they decided to go and elope instead. Well, you can imagine how that hit me and my wife. You can imagine how both of our lives crashed to a halt. Our beloved daughter, the main reason we got up in the morning and worked so hard both of our lives, our only child, had left us for a literal animal man. My wife Helena stopped getting out of bed and started watching broadcast television as if she had absolutely nothing left to live for. I myself barely had the willpower to supervise the servants and make sure none of them slacked off during this dark time. Well, of course, the two of them came home with their horribly bad news about the elopement. We tried to fight it at first. We honestly did. It's just that we don't want to scorch the earth of our only daughter's life. So the two of them tried to live on their own, but neither of them could hold down a job. With the boy, at least he has the excuse of needing to take many random days off due to werewolfism. In the case of my daughter, well, let's just say she isn't cut out for the life of a 9-to-5er. The situation at home isn't as much fun as before. My wife immediately forgives this big bruiser for everything, and instead of criticizing him, she and I get into arguments about him instead. Plus, there's the issue of the full moon. Much of the month, the werewolfism is optional, but on the week of the full moon, he can get extraordinarily chaotic, including random transformations and really severe mood swings. I think he should be in a concrete cell that week, personally, but I am the only one holding that opinion in the family. I mean, the servants agree with me. They seem saner than my family to me lately. Let me give you a for instance. My wife, she loves little dogs. She used to make a fuss over our neighbor's tiny little rat dog. When her son-in-law ate the little thing, all of a sudden, she acts like that's not such a big deal. She's willing to throw all her ethics out the window in a second if she needs to provide cover for Captain Unibrow over there. Honestly, it's like I don't even know the woman any longer. I had a point I wanted to reach when I started writing this. Instead, I think I've just driven myself to despair. After explaining the situation to you, I no longer really see this as solvable. I had hoped to terminate this marriage quickly, but now I'm starting to wonder about what happens next. If my daughter and that monstrous young fellow continue to stay as close as they currently are, it won't be too long before we hear the pitter-patter of little feet around here. The question is, will they be two-footed pitter-patters or four-footed? These are the questions I find myself asking ever since. My daughter eloped with a dogman. Lady werewolves, a growing problem? Dear Scary Stories NYC, I watched a recent episode about werewolves among the elite with great interest. My wife and I have recently moved to a somewhat exclusive neighborhood, one we had heard dark rumors about. The kind of things I can't talk about on YouTube. But none of that has seemed to be real, at least not so far. The problem that we have encountered is a quite surprising one. My wife is being pressured to join this sort of odd group. Or maybe I should call it a cult? All of the women in this association have higher social status than we enjoy currently, and so my wife will be joining them. Neither of us are happy about this, since one of the other requirements for entry, besides being successful and seemingly on the rise in your business or industry, is to allow yourself to become what these women call a werewolf. I know what you're thinking, that's kind of a masculine and old school word. I know what you mean. I would have thought they'd have a female equivalent word, probably using a Y or an X in a way so that you wouldn't know how to pronounce it. But that's one of the weird things about this group of ladies that frightens my wife the most. Although they at least claim to be an entirely new kind of thing, many of their views might be seen as somewhat old-fashioned, especially out here on the West Coast. They don't flaunt this fact, though. It's something that only insiders and their spouses would even be able to guess. My wife is sort of typical Californian in her worldview, and she'll still be able to profess those views publicly. But within the organization, she's been told, she will eventually come around to accept the views of the others. She will become part of a pack of werewolves, and they will be her sisters. Together, no obstacle in life can possibly stand in their way. If they can't use their talents in business, science, and the arts to get what they want, then they can resort to their werewolf abilities and advantages to have their way in the end. So what do I mean when I say they become werewolves, or that they have advantages? Well, oddly enough, it seems to change from woman to woman. I do know for a fact that they can become wolves. Real-looking, very striking wolves. I have seen 2 of them in that state, fully transformed, and yet unmistakably the same person somehow. Most of the women most of the time do not fully transform, however, and many of them will stop at the point of the ears and the tail. They can go out in public looking like that, and people just think it's a cute cosplay or something. When these ladies open their mouths, though, teeth are revealed that are quite unladylike, believe me. Although I have, as I implied, witnessed transformations, I do not understand what it was that I was looking at in any of those instances. There is a technology being used that I do not understand. They claim it is entirely biological and uses their nervous system only. But I wonder if they are cheating in some way and possibly using drugs or maybe some tech involving infrasound. The transformations are nothing like in a Hollywood movie. At least not in the ones I've seen. It's not anything painful like in American Werewolf in London. And it's nothing so biological either. It looks more like a CGI effect than anything else I've ever witnessed in my waking life. And that's precisely why I suspect the use of some agent, which could cause me to think I'm seeing things that I'm not actually seeing. And in this case, I don't really know if I mean I'm not actually seeing the werewolves, or if I'm not actually seeing the ladies in their human form. Both seem equally as grounded in reality when they are present in front of you. So obviously I'm not allowed in this ladies' club, but I have been told that there are male equivalents in our region. I have not expressed any interest in any of this though, but I am of course doing all my duties as spouse in terms of my wife's entry into this social club that she never asked to be let into. Update. I never finished or sent this email, so I may as well add to it. My wife has come back from a 2-day retreat with the women, and she's a changed person already. The way she speaks is different. The way she walks is different. I have to say she is fascinating to be around in ways that I had never noticed before. I had heard that vampires have hypnotic charisma, but now I suspect werewolves do too. I must say I am now under the impression that these ladies are powerful in more ways than just in the boardroom. I admit I am afraid of what else might be different in our relationship, and whether or not we will still be compatible in the ways that we were before. As for me, I find myself drawn to her more strongly than I can really understand. But I'm concerned that I will be unable to meet the needs of this woman, who is becoming something more than she was before. Update. Well, I was foolish to have worried. Last night was the best night of our marriage. She took me out to dinner, and it was just like when we first started dating. Well, except for the fact that she drove, and that she paid for dinner. But she was very nice to me all through the meal, making me feel like nothing had changed between us. When we got home, I saw her transform for the first time, and it was not as terrifying as I thought it would be. In fact, it was kinda cute, as she only partially transformed. Maybe I was just overreacting to all of this. Update. She's taken my keys and locked me out of the house. I should probably go to the neighbors and call 911, but I find the situation too embarrassing. I'm in my underwear, and I'm trying to stay in the shadows so that I don't alarm the neighbors or get arrested as a peeping Tom. I thought that moving up in society would make our lives more stable. I thought life would get simpler. Now I'm hiding in my own yard at night. Something is growling out there. I can't see what it is, but I can hear it. Update. It is now the following morning, and I am being let out of the county jail, where I spent the night. What happened was this. My wife, or what was once my wife, came out of the house and hid in the shadows, growling at me. She was more transformed than I had seen her before, but she was not fully a wolf. She was upright, on her hind legs, and she probably looked more like a classic werewolf than I had seen any of the other ladies look. She not only had the pointed ears on top, but her face was covered in fur, and much of the rest of her appeared to be furry as well, from what I could see peeking out from under her outfit. The thing that was the most different was that she had either lost control of herself, or else she had just decided to go with becoming a fully feral animal instead of the human being that I married. In either case, there's a kind of a choice on her part to go in this direction, and I admit that I am now afraid for my life, no matter what I do. If I go home, I would be putting myself at risk, as she is now entirely unpredictable. If I don't go home, her group will know something is wrong, and they'll hunt me down like I was the animal instead of them. Can I even divorce my wife at this point? I think I know too much. I don't see how I can get out of this situation. Update. My beautiful wife has been inducted into the organization I was telling you about, and I couldn't be prouder of her. I have the honor of telling you that all my qualms about this fine association of queen werewolves were unfounded and wrong. These are good women who together are leading us into a better future. I have resigned from my position at my former company to work for my wife and her sisterhood. It is my hope that by assisting these great women, I may be witness to parts of the history, or should I say, the herstory, that they will undoubtedly be creating from now on. So in short, there is no such thing as a lady werewolf, But if they did exist, they would be a good thing. No, a great thing. But of course they don't exist, and so I'm sorry I took up so much of your time. The end. Everybody loves Godzilla. Tim, there's no one as cool as him. Please join us in celebrating the 2nd anniversary of the month when Godzilla Tim upgraded to our $10 membership. In those 2 years, Godzilla Tim has grown into a legend as large as his nickname. Without this man, we would not still be on the internet. He was there for us when things were darkest, and we owe him far more than we can ever repay. This is a man among men. This is a living legend. Thank you, Godzilla Tim, and we hope you liked this episode. If you would like to join Godzilla Tim in helping us stay online, there are a number of ways you can help us out, and here to lay them all out in simple detail is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.